Vladimir Putin has finally spoken out, revealing his true intentions for the first time, secrets that were kept hidden until now. All of Ukraine is ours. He said it calmly, confidently, like it was a fact, and as he spoke, Russian troops were advancing into Sumy, far beyond the 4 regions he claimed in 2022. So now the world has to ask, was it ever just about Crimea or Donbass or NATO, or has this been the plan all along? Because what's happening now feels like the return of the original ambition. In late June, at the St. Petersburg Economic Forum, Putin stood on stage and repeated a line that chilled diplomats across Europe. Wherever a Russian soldier steps, it is ours. And Russian soldiers were stepping deep into Ukrainian soil across a 1,000-kilometer front, launching nearly 200 assaults per day. The city of Sumy in northeast Ukraine became a new target. Ukrainian troops pushed them back, but Russia wasn't stopping. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha replied bluntly, "Wherever a Russian soldier steps, he brings only death, destruction, and devastation." That same week, missiles rained down on Kiev. One crashed straight through an apartment block, floor by floor, until it exploded in the basement. 23 people died, not soldiers, civilians, children, families. A few days later, another Russian drone strike hit Dnipropetrovsk. 20 dead, nearly 300 injured. And in the chaos, Ukraine's President Zelensky posted what everyone was already thinking. Putin had just spoken completely openly. He wants all of Ukraine. But not just Ukraine. He also named Belarus, the Baltics, Moldova, the Caucasus, Kazakhstan, the same countries that broke free when the Soviet Union collapsed. According to leaked German military documents, Russia is preparing its army and industries for a large-scale war with NATO by the end of this decade. A full return to Cold War levels of confrontation. Germany, once cautious, is now preparing to spend 5% of its GDP on defense by 2035. And that's not a normal budget shift. That's a war posture. Each month, Russia captures more ground. 240 square kilometers in March, 379 in April, 507 in May, 588 in June. Not massive gains, but steady ones. And behind each square kilometer is a story of pain, of flight, of lives torn apart. Russian forces aren't just fighting armies, they are terrorizing civilians using missiles, drones, and fear to break the will of the population. It's a tactic as old as war itself. Bomb a neighborhood enough, and eventually people leave. And when they do, that territory becomes easier to claim. On the political front, peace talks are going nowhere. Putin says negotiations are nowhere close. Even after Donald Trump personally stepped in, the situation didn't move an inch. Trump once admired Putin. Now he calls him misguided. But still, at NATO's summit, Trump offered no solid commitment to Ukraine, only a vague promise to see if we can make some Patriots available. The weapons he referred to, Patriot air defense systems, are Ukraine's best chance at stopping incoming missiles. Zelensky has begged for them. So far, all he's received are F-16 parts. In contrast, European support is surging. Over $35 billion pledged this year, already catching up to the $50 billion total from all of last year. Even countries like Norway and the UK are now helping Ukraine build weapons locally, sharing drone tech, expanding production, and even planning domestic missile development. Zelensky wants 0.25% of each partner nation's GDP invested directly into Ukraine's defense industry next year. Not just aid, but infrastructure. A future-proof defense economy. But the political path is still blocked. Ukraine's ambitions to join NATO and the European Union are what triggered the invasion in the first place. Russia says both goals must be abandoned for peace. In April, a ceasefire draft from the US reportedly included a ban on NATO membership for Ukraine. And just this week, Slovakia blocked Ukraine's EU negotiations and a proposed sanctions package that would have cut Russian energy exports. Slovakia's prime minister even hinted at pulling out of NATO altogether. One move, one veto, and Putin's influence is suddenly back in the room. Even with all this, Ukraine isn't backing down. It's not just defending territory. It's launching drone strikes on weapons factories deep inside Russia in cities like Tula. Zelensky's team says they're developing the Sapson, a domestically built ballistic missile that could hit targets 500 kilometers away. That's halfway to Moscow. Asked if Sapson could reach the Russian capital, one Ukrainian official simply said, "Things are moving very well. I think we will be able to surprise our enemies on many occasions." On the other hand, Russia's grand strategy has been remarkably consistent, if not always successful. At its core, it's about restoring imperial influence, reclaiming a sphere of control once held by the Soviet Union, preventing NATO's further expansion, and undermining the Western-led global order. Ukraine to Moscow is not just another country, it's a keystone. Its independence, democracy, and Western alignment are threats because they prove that an ex-Soviet republic can break free and thrive without Russia. So when Putin launched the full-scale invasion in 2022, the goal was to topple Kiev, end Ukrainian sovereignty, install a puppet regime. But that gamble failed. The Blitz collapsed, Kiev held. And so Russia recalibrated, shifting from shock and awe to attrition, a slower, more brutal strategy. Now the goal is to bleed Ukraine into submission, to stretch Western support thin, to make this war last longer than the free world's attention span. Today, their focus is clear: solidify control of the land corridor from Russia to Crimea and dominate the Donbas region. To support this strategy, Putin has ordered mass mobilizations, revamped Russia's military-industrial complex, and poured billions into drone and missile production. And while missiles fall, another weapon is quietly at work: energy. Russia throttled gas supplies to Europe, betting it would fracture the Western alliance. It didn't, but it did expose vulnerabilities. And Moscow won't stop looking for cracks. Russia's also turned to information warfare, spreading propaganda in the West, framing NATO as the aggressor, portraying Ukraine as corrupt, fascist, or a mere pawn. It's psychological attrition aimed not just at Ukrainians, but at Western voters. Economically, Russia has isolated itself from the West, but not the world. In fact, it's building a parallel alliance of convenience: China, Iran, North Korea. These countries aren't ideological soulmates, but they share one thing in common. They benefit from a weakened, distracted, and divided West. So while Western sanctions bite, Moscow pivots. Oil flows east, drones arrive from Iran, ammunition from Pyongyang, and Chinese trade keeps Russia's wartime economy afloat. Barely. This isn't just a war in Europe. It's becoming a global stress test for the balance of power. Into this complex reality stepped Donald Trump with a 50-day ultimatum. Either Russia agrees to a ceasefire, or it faces what Trump called severe tariffs, not just on itself, but on any country doing business with Moscow. The threat of secondary sanctions, essentially punishing Russia's partners, could hit economies like China or India, but it's unclear how far Trump is actually willing to go. So far, Russia's reaction has been dismissive. Dmitry Medvedev mocked the ultimatum. The Kremlin said it needs time to analyze. And on the ground, the war hasn't slowed. 267 drones were launched in one night. Missiles struck Medvedev, Kharkiv, and Sumy. Casualties are climbing. Putin may be listening, but he's not changing course. And while Trump threatens tariffs, Russia is escalating everything else. In June and July alone, Russia launched record-breaking drone attacks, often more in a single night than in an entire month in 2024. Ukraine's air defenses intercepted hundreds, but not all. Civilians were killed in Odessa, Zaporizhia, and central Kiev. Meanwhile, Russia claims to be intercepting waves of Ukrainian drones, some headed toward Moscow. In Zelenograd, near the capital, a drone hit an apartment block. The Kremlin keeps repeating the same line: "We want peace, but we won't stop until our goals are met." What are those goals? Ukraine must surrender the 4 regions Russia illegally annexed in 2022. It must abandon any NATO ambitions, and it must accept limits on its military, essentially giving up any meaningful defense. Zelensky has flatly refused. So have Ukraine's allies. And that's why, despite talk of ceasefires, the war continues. But for Russia, peace doesn't mean compromise, it means victory. This isn't just a territorial war, it's a battle over who gets to shape the 21st century. Russia is betting it can outlast the West, that democracies are too divided, too distracted, too hesitant. Ukraine, meanwhile, is fighting for survival, but also for something bigger. The idea that a nation can choose its future, that sovereignty still matters, that international law still holds. And now, with the war entering its 4th year, both sides are doubling down. Russia with factories, fuel, and fear. Ukraine with Western weapons, drone strikes, and defiance. So what happens next? That depends on more than just missiles and maps, because wars like this aren't just fought on the battlefield. They're won or lost in the space between headlines. The longer this drags on, the more Russia bets the world will move on, that democracies will get tired, that silence will be mistaken for peace. But if you've watched this far, you're not one of those people. You're paying attention, and that still matters. If you found this breakdown useful, share it. Make sure more people understand what's really at stake. And if you want to stay ahead of where this conflict is going, subscribe. We cover the moves before they hit the front page. Because in wars like this, what you know might just be the first defense.